Israel's Democratic Party leader accuses Netanyahu of staging coup over a Shin Bet appointment. Israeli media reports a new Gaza aid distribution mechanism to take effect tomorrow. And Syrian President al-Shara meets U.S. envoy in Istanbul to discuss lifting sanctions. The head of Israel's Democratic Party, Yair Golan, has accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of orchestrating a full-scale government coup by insisting on appointing David Zinni as head of the Shin Bet. Golan warned that the country must be shut down if Netanyahu continues to defy both the Attorney General and the legal advisors. He asserted that Zinni is unqualified to lead the Internal Security Agency. Israeli media have reported that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is working to assert greater control over senior appointments in the government. According to the report, Netanyahu has dismissed 6 members of the State Civil Service Appointments Commission in a bid to replace them with officials aligned with his politics. Or policies, rather. Former Israeli Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot has described the appointment of David Zinni as Shin Bet chief during wartime as a farce. Eisenkot urged Zinni to reject the post, saying his nomination is based on distorted political consideration. He also added that Netanyahu and his security cabinet has failed to achieve their war objectives in Gaza or bring home the detainees despite over 800 or rather 600 days of conflict. Former Shin Bet directors have petitioned Israel's Supreme Court to appoint Deputy Director Ronen Bar as interim chief of the Internal Security Agency. Israel's public broadcaster has reported that the former officials are also urging the formation of a new legal framework to govern future appointments in this position. Thousands of Israelis have gathered in Tel Aviv urging the government to end the ongoing war in Gaza and secure the release of detainees. Demonstrators voiced support for a ceasefire agreement, with some calling for an immediate deal to bring detainees home. Others demanded the resignation of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, blaming his leadership for prolonging the conflict. The protest follows the collapse of a previous ceasefire deal with no new agreement in sight. Mounting political turmoil in Israel as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing growing backlash over a controversial security appointment, deepening divisions within the government, and raising serious questions about the country's institutional integrity.
A high-level political and security rift is widening in Israel following Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's contentious decision to appoint David Zini as head of the Shin Bet during wartime, an appointment that has drawn harsh criticism from across the political spectrum and within the security establishment. Former Israeli Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot condemned the move as a farce, describing it as driven by distorted political motives rather than national security needs. Eisenkot also accused Netanyahu and the security cabinet of failing to meet the goals of the war on Gaza, including the return of the detainees, even after 600 days of conflict. The backlash intensified after Israel's Supreme Court ruled the dismissal of former Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar inappropriate and illegal. The country's Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara also weighed in, accusing Netanyahu of violating legal procedures and raising concerns about serious conflicts of interest in the appointment process. Opposition figures have also joined the criticism. Yair Lapid called on Zini to reject the position, warning that Netanyahu's actions were in clear breach of judicial oversight. Benny Gantz of the National Unity Party accused the prime minister of undermining the rule of law and dragging Israel into constitutional crisis with dangerous consequences for its internal stability and national security. The political chaos has triggered widespread public anger, with thousands taking to the streets in protest. Observers warn that the escalating confrontation between Netanyahu's government and the judiciary is damaging institutional credibility and deepening social divisions in an already polarized country. As accusations of corruption and power consolidation continue to mount, Israel now finds itself at a critical juncture, where the integrity of its institutions may hinge on the outcome of a battle being fought not only on legal grounds, but at the core of its national conscience.
And for more analysis, we now move on to Rihem Morsi in our newsroom. Rihem?
Thank you, Rana. To help us analyse the current situation, we're joined by Dr. Ahmed Fouad Anwar, a researcher in Israeli affairs and Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs member, joining us from Cairo. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Firstly, sir, let's start off by asking, how does Yair Golan's accusation of a government coup reflect the deepening divisions within the Israeli politics?
After greetings to you and to the viewers, in fact, the Israeli public is sensing that the objectives were not met and that there is the complete indifference from the Israeli officials who are towards the Israeli detainees for around 600 days now, which is causing Israeli outrage. As the government is not paying much attention to saving the souls of the Israeli citizens, but only serving personal interests, which creates a lot of division inside the Israeli front that is not giving the priority for releasing the detainees and opening a line of negotiation with the resistance. The other point that the government performance on the level of services and the economy also is deteriorating, and there is no relevant prospects for any growth, so the credibility of the leadership is fading.
Also, now Netanyahu is insisting to appoint Zini despite court orders. How does this highlight systemic corruption when it comes to government appointments?
I see that the Israeli community is objecting heavily, but Netanyahu is crossing all the red lines, meaning that Netanyahu insisting on getting out of any attempts to be prosecuted by continuing the war and the genocide and the siege on Gaza Strip. These measures can be overlooked for some while, but it cannot be overlooked forever. by the Israeli community. Most of the Israeli community now is seeing that Netanyahu is serving his personal interests as well as his assistants, and he is trying to not to evade prosecution and evade any hearings, but he cannot rely on that forever.
Well, so as you said, Netanyahu and his government have crossed every red line possible. How might the ongoing political struggles influence public perceptions of corruption among Israeli leaders, especially given the many legal troubles that Netanyahu is currently facing?
Netanyahu will not be able to stall much further, because he was the Minister of Defense, and then the Chief of Staff, and then the military intelligence. These things leave very little for Netanyahu. And his far-right supporters will no longer be able to keep their path forward. But during the Trump visit to the region, when he spoke more than once on the necessity of ending the war, and he did not take back completely the idea of displacing the Palestinians completely.
Well, given what you just said and the current political climate within Israeli politics, how can the opposition parties effectively challenge corruption?
Of course, there is increasing popularity for the opposition, and I think that the opposition will have a lot of opportunity, and there are several names to be mentioned from the opposition to obtain seats and to reform the government. And we will see, we might see early elections. All of these are pressures practiced by the Israeli public, and they are threatening the position of Netanyahu gradually, and which makes him reconsider his actions. We have also seen the chief of staff opposing to recycling the solutions and reusing old solutions that has proven failure before.
Well, so what about the internal divisions themselves? Will it eventually impede Israel's ability to resume its aggressive war on Gaza?
In my opinion, it is affecting the scene, but very remotely. There are divisions regarding basic things, such as 1/5 of the Jewish population, and another part allocated to the Palestinians of 48. These are two camps are opposing now and practicing pressures, which makes, in addition to the economic paralysis, I think that the Israeli community has to reconsider a lot of things in the light of the Netanyahu failure and the military to achieve the objectives of the war.
Yes,
the remaining detainees in Gaza.
Your point there clear, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed Fouad Anwar from Cairo, a researcher on Israeli affairs and an Egyptian Council Foreign Affairs member. Thank you for joining us here on Qnews. And now we go back to Ronald Assas in our studio.
Thank you very much, Riham. And Israel's Army Radio has announced that the paratrooper brigade has entered Gaza and joined the 98th Division operating in Khan Yunis. The broadcaster added that all regular infantry and armored brigades are now inside the enclave and prepared. Israeli media reported that a new mechanism for aid distribution in Gaza will go into effect starting tomorrow. Political officials have said that all distribution points this week will be located south of the Netzarim corridor. A Haraz investigation has revealed that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu selected a U.S. firm to handle Gaza aid distribution without consulting the military or holding a public tender. The report notes that several Israeli businessmen are among the company's owners. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has stressed that maintaining a continuous flow of humanitarian aid to Gaza is the only way to prevent catastrophe. The agency said Gaza's population cannot wait any longer, calling for 500 to 600 aid trucks per day to enter the territory under United Nations oversight. Malaysia's Foreign Minister Mohammed Hassan has condemned what he described as atrocities committed in Gaza.
Excellencies, crises around the world continue unabated. The total siege of Gaza by the Israeli forces is causing mass starvations and death. The atrocities committed against the Palestinian people continue to reflect indifference and double standards. They are a direct result of erosion of sanctity and international law. ASEAN cannot remain silent. We have a voice in world affairs, and we must use our voice to speak up for the oppressed and offer solutions grounded in principles and international law.
The Spanish capital, Madrid, is hosting an international meeting today focused on supporting the two-state solution. The gathering includes members of the joint contact group between the OIC and the Arab League, along with European countries that recognize Palestine. The goal is to encourage global recognition of the Palestinian state and revive peace talks. At least 38 Palestinians have been killed and 204 others were injured in Israeli attacks across Gaza in the past 24 hours. Gaza's health ministry stated that the low total death toll from Israel's war on Gaza has risen to 53,939, with 122,797 injured since October the 7th of the year 2023. It also added that at least 3,785 people have been killed and 10,756 others injured in the enclave since March the 18th, when Israel broke the ceasefire. According to Gaza's media office, Israeli forces now effectively control 77% of the Gaza Strip. The area under Israeli control has expanded through ground operations, military presence in residential zones, and restrictions that prevent Palestinians from returning to their homes and lands. The office accused Israel of using forced evacuations and heavy firepower to advance its hold over the enclave, urging the United Nations and international community to intervene. It described the situation as a continued campaign of aggression and occupation in violation of international law. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Red Crescent has reported that 10 people suffered tear gas inhalation during an Israeli raid in Nablus. A child was also wounded by live fire in the city's old quarter. Separately, Palestinian media has said settlers attacked and burned homes in the village of Burkin and west of Salfit. Moving on, the Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv has reopened after being temporarily shut down due to a missile fired from Yemen. Israeli military officials confirmed that air defenses intercepted the missile. Earlier today, sirens sounded in Jerusalem, southern Israel, and the West Bank settlements, followed by reports of large explosions in occupied Jerusalem. Moving on to Lebanon, where Prime Minister Nawaf Salam has reaffirmed the commitment to liberate all Lebanese territories from Israeli occupation and to establish state sovereignty as outlined in the Ta'if Agreement. Salam emphasized Lebanon's right to defend itself against any aggression under the United Nations Charter, and also announced plans to rebuild what has been destroyed by Israeli attacks through mobilizing Arab and international support. The Lebanese Prime Minister also stated that the country is continuously working with the United States and France to pressure Israel to halt its aggressions and withdraw from Lebanese territories. Russia and Ukraine have concluded a three-day detainee exchange, each releasing 303 detainees. According to Russia's defense ministry, the exchange, part of an agreement reached on May the 16th in Istanbul, saw a total of 1,000 detainees exchanged by each other from May the 23rd to the 25th. While no ceasefire was agreed, the exchange signals a tentative step towards de-escalation. Ukraine has reiterated its readiness for a 30-day ceasefire, but Russia insists military operations will continue until its conditions are met. Russia is preparing to submit a phased technical proposal to Ukraine outlining the framework for a potential peace agreement. According to Konstantin Koschev, Deputy Speaker of Russia's Upper House of Parliament, the draft memorandum is reportedly in its final stage, though no public details have been disclosed. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov confirmed that work on the agreement is nearing completion and that preparations are underway for a second round of negotiations with Ukraine. However, a date and location for the talks have not yet been determined. Russia has launched a massive overnight drone and missile assault on Kyiv and multiple regions across Ukraine for a second night in a row, killing at least 12 people and injuring dozens more. According to Ukrainian officials, among the dead were 3 children of the capital, and in Chernihiv, a non-residential building caught fire in a strike that damaged over 1,000 square meters of property. Ukraine's Air Force reported that Russia fired 367 drones and missiles, marking its largest single aerial attack since the war began more than 3 years ago. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara met with U.S. envoy Tom Barak in Istanbul to discuss lifting American sanctions on Syria. The presidency said that the sanctions continue to hinder economic recovery and burden civilians. Al-Shara reaffirmed Syria's opposition to any attempts to divide the country and stressed the government's commitment to national unity. AFP reports that Syria has agreed to help the United States locate missing American nationalists in Damascus. U.S. envoy Tom Barak said the move is a major step forward in bilateral ties. He also added that President Donald Trump considers the return or recovery of American citizens a top priority. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has met Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara at the presidential palace in Istanbul. Attendees included Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan and Turkish National Defense Minister. The meeting, described as unexpected and close to the press, focused on regional developments. Erdogan reaffirmed Turkey's support for Syria, welcomed the lifting of sanctions, and condemned the Israeli aggression as unacceptable. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Israel's Democratic Party leader accuses Netanyahu of staging coup over a Shin Bet appointment. Israeli media reports a new Gaza aid distribution mechanism to take effect tomorrow. And Syrian President al-Shara meets U.S. envoy in Istanbul to discuss lifting sanctions. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.